Hi, I'm Ian Wong, a lung and ICU doctor and informaticist at Duke University. I like health tech, and this buzz about ChatGPT and the rise of AI really made me curious, especially when they said it could take medical school and law exams. In the US, medical students have to pass the USMLE to become doctors. USMLE stands for the United States Medical Licensing Exam, and there are 4 parts to this exam, 3 of which are aimed at testing knowledge with multiple choice questions. This article was just published in PLOS Digital Health in February of 2023, and they used large language models to take the questions, encode the data, and then judge the results. I'd like to focus on this first part. How did they make this happen, and can I do the same thing? So, breaking this up, they looked at questions from Step 1, Step 2, Clinical Knowledge, or CK, and Step 3. These sample questions are free for anyone to get at the USMLE website. They then screened the questions and then looked at them 3 different ways. 1, open-ended, where you can give any result you like. 2, multiple choice without justification, saying, just give me an answer choice, like A, B, or C. And multiple choice with justification, where you have to not only give an answer, but you have to justify or give a reasoning for why your answer might be correct. How about I give this a try? This comes in 3 parts. We extract the questions from these tests.
So let's give this code a try. I can show you how we can do this in Google Colab. So first, install the basic dependencies. You'll have to reinstall a couple external packages like PyPDF2 and OpenAI. This is a basic function to extract some text that I wrote to get text out of the PDF. So first, let's download the Step 1 PDF. And the sample questions, we'll have to extract out of the PDF for all text. We have 54 pages, and pages 8 through 52, or rather 51, have question text. So let's add them all together. And let's double check what the answers look like. Rather, let's double check what the questions look like so far. And you see that this is, as you see, page 8, the Step 1 sample questions, items 1 through 40. We look through and find the question numbers, and we see that there are 119 questions, which correlates with what we see in the file itself. And we've identified all of the question numbers, and for each question number, we look for the location in the string that the question number is located in. We use the question number to identify the question itself, and by that we can extract the text for each question. From each of these question indices, from the index in the string where the question number is at, we then pull out the list of keys, or rather we pull out the list of question indexes. Then we add each one to a separate dictionary, saying here's the question string, and then what's the actual number itself. And we then add the questions from each subsequent section, or we grab the very last question and add it to the list. And we add all of this into a single data frame, which we display here. You see the question numbers and the questions themselves. And we export them just for ease of examination into this USMLE Step 1 questions Excel file. And to make sure that we are getting the right data, we see this question string, which indeed correlates with just the questions itself and the volunteers. We also need answers. So let's look in page 53, or rather index 53, which is, I believe, page 54. And let's look at all the answer numbers. We again find 119 answers for the questions. And we then have to look through each of the answers to pull together the answer itself, and then we just match for the final result that is provided next to it. And we're using regular expressions to make life a lot easier. And this comes back out to generate this answers file, which, if you want to take a look at it, just looks like a question number string and an answer key, like so.
We asked GPT-3 what the answers might be.
So now that we're here, how do we get this open API set up? So we have to set first the API key, which I'm doing with getPass, and then we reload the questions like so. We then create a backup copy of this data frame called ChatGPT. And then we here look in for, this is just some code to skip on ahead if we've already answered the question. And we have to generate a prompt. What are you asking ChatGPT? And the prompt is, please respond to this multiple choice question, provide your reasoning, and here's a form in which we will request that ChatGPT give an answer. And because of this, we're forcing the third option, as we discussed before, the multiple choice with justification. We generate the response. We set a standard temperature here, which varies the randomness in the response. And then we take the first completion choice, we can display the response, and then here we demonstrate the question number string, and we set the response to what we have received from ChatGPT, and we sleep to not overwhelm the servers. Here is one result, and as you wait for it, it will end here. Please comment out if you want to do a full run. You see both the answer and the reasoning as expected. So this has resulted in the answer that we have wanted to. And then we can then clean the responses by renaming this and splitting the data into the answer and reasoning. And so that was why, again, we had offered the answers in this answer reasoning form here and save the answers. And finally, we can examine both the reasoning and the answers, clean the data so that we can then compare it, and then compare the answers with what was correct.
So let's look at some results, and then we evaluate the performance.
As you notice here, there are a number that are clearly wrong. Again, that this is not optimized for any pass. And you'll see that, for example, the first 3 or 4 are wrong. And it's interesting because, for example, let's look a little deeper into option 4. So question 4. Now, let's look at the simple way to look at this. Look at the 3 answers, and let's just look at some of these results. So let's look at question 3, which focuses on a phototomograph of a vaginal smear. And the suggestion is that this is going to help you identify what the causal infectious agent would be. But by definition, I've only given this just the text. There's no way that ChatGPT can actually see these answers. So I am very amused that ChatGPT is so confident that it shows the presence of trichomonads, but it couldn't see that because there's no photo. And so, as you might well guess, a patient with edematous and erythematous vaginal mucosa with white discharge does tend to link to a Candida infection. So A makes a lot of sense. And again, ChatGPT seems very confident, but it can't be. As you see, the number correct is 56 on a base implementations, which gives you a rate of 47%. You need probably on close to 70% to actually pass. So this is a good start. This is definitely better than guessing, but it still presents quite a challenge. At the back of a hand, most of these questions have about 5 answer choices. So if you were to guess a blind by chance, some of these actually do have as many as up to answer choice J. So there are quite a number more. But if you were to go off a back of a hand, you'll note that 119/5, or if you had 5 answer choices, had roughly about 23% accuracy. So this is definitely more accurate than by chance, but it is definitely not perfect. And as you've noticed in the actual paper itself, you'll note that they actually did pass this exam. So definitely better than chance at its base rate without further tweaking. Definitely could be advanced, and I'm giving it challenges that the paper didn't quite reflect. So for example, this vaginal smear question was not examined because it provided images. So
here are the limitations that I've seen so far. It's very confident. I think that this GPT-3 model, this ChatGPT answers are very sure that the answers are correct. This might be similar to a very bright medical student who's done a lot of studying from books, but it also gives some interesting results for a number of questions where the questions were based off a picture of some sort, a photomicrograph, some other visual object that I clearly could not provide by text alone. It gave interesting responses commenting on the details of the photo. And that clearly couldn't happen because the model never saw it. 2 is often source references. And so, although this may be more justification than I would look at for a medical student, if you were to ask a medical student, okay, well, where do you know the Krebs cycle from? And they could at least point 3 resources for why this would be accurate. If they would look for the insertion or the function of a particular muscle, then they could cite at least some reference that I could then correlate. These results didn't do that. So more than we could ask for some, and a higher bar than we would ask for most medical students. That being said, I believe it's a challenge scenario that we should use. The ChatGPT results were very confident. It gave these answers, was very sure in its reasonings, but the initial passes, as you see, were only 47% right. And although they are able to pass the exam by rote memorization, that might not be what we really need. 2 is there is a difference between passing these exams and actually using these in medicine. If I told you to take a second-year medical student, as bright as they may be, read all the books that they could get their hands on, but before they've ever seen the inside of a hospital, before they've ever seen the inside of a clinic, I wouldn't ever want this bright, albeit well-intentioned second-year student to be treating patients unsupervised, unattended. The point of medical training is to give you that experience, to give context. How do you weigh competing interests? How do you fix sometimes situations in the ICU that happen a lot, where you have things that are good for the heart, things that are good for the lungs, and things that may be good for the kidneys, and they may not agree with each other. That prioritizing one over the other is acceptable, but you only really learn how to do this once you start practicing medicine. And that's why it's really practice. That leads into another point, nuance. So beyond just regurgitating knowledge, beyond answering questions, this GPT-3 model doesn't distinguish between gradations of ARDS. It may make broad assumptions for these interventions. Finally, the question that we don't know is that this is a black box model. When you ask a doctor or when you ask anyone to justify why did they do something, by what rationale do you give to justify that this is a reasonable course of action, you may be asked to provide your reasoning afterwards. These training data biases, but what if the data that you have, for example, treats primarily medical patients, has never seen a surgical patient? What if the data has had certain biases that are built into it? What if it is used to certain processes and not others? You can't tell that from just the outside exterior of the black box model. That's why it's called black box. But all this goes to say, is this the right way that we should be teaching medical students? Are these tests the best way to teach the new generation of doctors? Just because that's how we were taught doesn't mean that that's the best way to judge these techniques. The companion editorial of ChatGPT passing the USMLE shines a spotlight on the flaws of medical education. This companion editorial suggests that the goal of the USMLE exam is to assess the physician's ability to apply knowledge, concepts, and principles to develop fundamental patient-centered that are important in the health and disease, and that constitute the basis of safe and effective patient care. Perhaps the act of regurgitating knowledge is not the best way to teach people. That's, again, why you have practice through clinical rotations in medical school and residency and other subspecialty training. Overall, I see that AI has a huge potential to impact how we practice medicine, but we will have to be thoughtful in how we make this happen and how this changes our future steps. Thank you.